The most prestigious galactic military academy stands tall against the purple sky of Centauri Prime, its crystalline spires housing the brightest minds in 17 galaxies. Inside Lecture Hall 7, 200 alien students from across the cosmos sit frozen, mandibles clicking nervously, their multiple eyes fixed on the classroom door, waiting for their new professor of military history and combat theory to arrive. The previous instructor vanished last week after reading the newly declassified human combat archives. The official report stated voluntary retirement, but everyone saw them running through the quantum garden screaming about something called duct tape warfare. The door slides open. The room falls silent. A human strolls in, whistling an ancient tune. He's wearing what the database identifies as cargo shorts and a Hawaiian shirt, traditional Earth battle dress. In one hand, he's casually tossing what appears to be a small green metallic egg. Several crystalline students instinctively shift to their liquid state in terror. The human reaches a podium, grins, and pulls the pin from the grenade. As panic erupts, he calmly starts peeling it, revealing an apple painted to look like an explosive. Looking up at his terrified class, he takes a bite and announces the day's lesson: how humanity turned absolutely everything into a weapon, starting with fruit trees and rocks. The academy would never be the same. Dean Xylax's office buzzed with concerned murmurs as the administrative council gathered for an emergency meeting. The dean's tentacles twisted anxiously around their ceremonial staff, all 7 eyes fixed on the personnel file floating in the holographic display. Professor James Whitlock, Earth Military Academy, Specialization, Human Combat Evolution and Tactical History. The file showed standard human credentials: PhD in Military History, Combat Veteran, and most worryingly, something called Paintball Tournament Champion. The Council's risk assessment AI had already crashed 3 times trying to calculate the chaos probability of letting a human teach warfare to impressionable young aliens. But they had no choice. The Galactic Education Board demanded a comprehensive course on human military tactics after the recent Devourer crisis. No other species could teach it. The last 6 professors suffered nervous breakdowns trying to understand human battle strategies. One ended up in psychiatric care after discovering something humans called guerrilla warfare had nothing to do with large Earth primates. Security footage from Professor Whitlock's first hour on campus already showed concerning incidents. He'd turned the faculty lounge into what he called a tactical retreat position, rearranged the quantum library using something called boot camp organization, and somehow convinced the cafeteria AI to serve something called MREs, which 3 different species had classified as biological weapons. The dean's assistant burst in, all 4 arms waving data tablets. The new professor had requisitioned training supplies: water balloons, Nerf guns, and 200 copies of The Art of War. The council's translator AI was still trying to understand why humans wrote poetry about combat. Through the window, Dean Xylax watched Professor Whitlock crossing the quantum gardens, still whistling, still tossing that apple grenade. Students scattered in his path, some shifting into camouflage patterns instinctively. The human stopped to help a young arachnid student with their books, then demonstrated what he called a proper tactical reload technique for carrying academic materials. The dean signed the final approval form, adding a note: minimal property damage requested. Please avoid teaching anything involving this duct tape substance. The engineering department is still recovering from the last incident. As the council dispersed, the risk assessment AI displayed one final warning: probability of maintaining normal academic atmosphere, 0.0001%. Probability of learning legendary human combat techniques. Calculating. Error. Humans do not follow probability rules. Class would begin tomorrow. The galaxy would never look at warfare the same way again. Professor Whitlock stood before the class, holding what appeared to be an ordinary rock. The students' various sensory organs focused intently, some species activating additional perception modules to detect any quantum anomalies or hidden technological components. The rock, disappointingly, remained just a rock. The professor tossed it casually between hands, explaining how early humans used simple thrown projectiles as their first weapons. A hive mind student in the front row, connected to their colony's ancient military archives, raised three appendages in confusion. Their translator buzzed as they asked why any species would throw away their weapons during combat. The explanation about retrieving thrown objects led to even more confusion. A crystalline student fragmented into smaller crystals from pure bafflement when Professor Whitlock described how humans would practice throwing rocks for hours to improve accuracy. The class descended into chaos when he mentioned that children often learn combat skills through something called baseball. The demonstration phase proved even more disturbing. Professor Whitlock set up simple targets, teaching proper throwing technique. The gaseous collective students had to be reminded repeatedly that they couldn't just flow around obstacles. The point was to hit them. A young mechanoid tried calculating the optimal throwing trajectory using their quantum processor, only to short-circuit when the professor explained that humans did this instinctively. Things escalated when they moved on to stick weapons. The professor brought out a collection of wooden training implements, explaining the concept of spears. A photonic student nearly went supernova trying to comprehend why humans attach pointy rocks to long sticks instead of developing energy weapons first. The arachnid delegation was particularly disturbed by the revelation that humans had invented the stick before the wheel. The practical exercise in basic stance and movement patterns caused 3 diplomatic incidents. The quantum probability students kept shifting between multiple combat stances simultaneously, arguing it was more efficient. The hive mind collective attempted to link consciousness with their practice spears, leading to a small revolt in the equipment storage room. Professor Whitlock had to explain that no, the spears weren't going to achieve sentience, no matter how much psychic energy they channeled into them. The lesson on tactical formations sent the class into another spiral. The concept of humans standing shoulder to shoulder, walking toward enemy formations while being shot at, caused several species to develop new organs just to express their disbelief. The professor's casual mention of ancient Sparta produced so many raised appendages that the classroom's artificial gravity struggled to compensate. When Professor Whitlock pulled up historical footage of human battles, the Academy's AI triggered 3 separate emergency protocols. The sight of humans charging directly at superior forces while screaming caused a mass evacuation of the first row. The silicon-based students began spontaneously computing the survival probabilities, only to crash when they realized humans won these encounters. The homework assignment seemed simple enough. Analyze basic human squad tactics. By morning, the Academy's psychological support unit was overwhelmed. Students reported nightmares about humans using improvised weapons. The ethereal species representatives had to be convinced that no, humans couldn't actually kill you with a spoon, though Professor Whitlock's awkward pause when asked about this didn't help. The dean's office received 17 formal complaints, mostly concerning the professor's offhand comments about humans turning anything into a weapon. The bureaucratic collective demanded a comprehensive list of potential weapons, only to suffer a collective anxiety attack when Professor Whitlock started listing office supplies. The first week concluded with a pop quiz about basic human combat principles. The questions seemed straightforward until students reached the essay portion. Explain why humans prefer simple, reliable weapons over advanced technology. 3 different species requested timeline transfers, unable to process how a civilization advanced enough for faster-than-light travel still valued something called a combat knife. Professor Whitlock graded the papers with obvious amusement, especially enjoying the quantum physics students' attempt to explain human combat through string theory. Their conclusion that humans existed simultaneously in all possible combat states until observed fighting was technically correct, but missed the simpler explanation that humans just really enjoyed hitting things. As the professor prepared for Week 2's lessons on siege warfare, the Academy's risk assessment AI began displaying a countdown timer. Nobody knew what it was counting down to, but the mechanical students swore they could hear it whimpering. The Academy's maintenance staff had barely recovered from the basic combat lessons when Professor Whitlock announced they were moving on to creative tactical thinking. The classroom had been rearranged into what he called problem-solving stations, though the risk assessment AI insisted on calling them chaos generators. Professor Whitlock started with historical examples of human battlefield innovation. The presentation began innocently enough with the Trojan horse. The Silicon students nodded appreciatively at the logical deception until the professor mentioned it was just the first recorded instance of humans turning furniture into weapons. The following hour-long tangent about humans weaponizing household items sent the bureaucratic collective into another paperwork-generating panic attack. The class watched in horror as Professor Whitlock demonstrated how humans had transformed farming tools into martial arts weapons. The botanical students, who had evolved beyond physical combat eons ago, began developing thorns defensively as the professor explained how humans turned gardening into combat training. When he mentioned that humans still practice these techniques for fun, 3 different species filed formal protests with their embassies. The practical exercise in improvised tactics proved especially challenging. Students were given everyday objects and asked to find creative combat applications. The hive mind collective tried to achieve consciousness with a stapler. The quantum probability students created a superposition of all possible weapon configurations, accidentally inventing 17 new types of office supplies in the process. Things escalated during the urban warfare segment. Professor Whitlock's explanation of humans fighting building to building caused several architecture students to redesign their final projects with unnecessary defensive features. The crystalline species representatives began spontaneously developing structural reinforcements. By lunch, the cafeteria had somehow transformed into a tactical strongpoint, complete with overlapping fields of fire established using lunch trays. The homework assignment, analyzing famous human battles where creativity overcame superior technology, triggered another wave of existential crises. The mechanoid students couldn't process how humans had defeated advanced AI systems using inflatable tanks and cardboard airplanes. The energy being delegation spent 3 days trying to understand why humans considered weather a weapon. During the section on asymmetric warfare, Professor Whitlock introduced the concept of guerrilla tactics. The gaseous collective students became so paranoid about ambush techniques that they refused to travel through ventilation systems. The hive mind representatives started checking their shared consciousness for insurgent thoughts. The breaking point came during the lesson on psychological warfare. Professor Whitlock's casual mention that humans use music as a weapon caused the Academy's Musical Appreciation Club to disband immediately. The demonstration of intimidation tactics backfired when he showed up wearing something called Crocs with socks, traumatizing several fashion-sensitive species. A minor incident erupted when the quantum physics students attempted to recreate human battlefield improvisation in the laboratory. Their experiment with something called hillbilly engineering resulted in the accidental creation of an interdimensional pizza launcher. Professor Whitlock awarded them extra credit, much to the dean's dismay. The arachnid delegation became particularly concerned after learning about human hand-to-hand combat techniques. The revelation that humans would willingly engage in close combat with significantly larger opponents led to the entire species developing anxiety-induced moat patterns. Their representative filed a formal complaint about humans not following the laws of nature. As the week progressed, the Academy's Psychological Support Unit reported a sharp increase in students questioning their species' combat doctrines. The ethereal beings, who had previously relied on advanced energy manipulation, were caught practicing something they called space kung fu. The silicon-based students began upgrading their processors to better understand human battlefield chaos theory. Professor Whitlock's offhand comment about humans turning defeat into victory by sheer stubbornness caused the tactical simulation computers to crash. The AI needed 3 reboots to accept that humans would sometimes win battles by refusing to acknowledge they were losing. The concept of fighting spirit had to be classified as a non-quantifiable combat multiplier. The dean's office received a concerning report about students starting an underground club dedicated to studying human combat improvisation. The club's first meeting ended with the accidental discovery of 17 new ways to weaponize the Academy's replication systems. Professor Whitlock was strictly forbidden from teaching anything involving the phrase, "Hold my beer and watch this." The Academy's governing board called an emergency meeting after Professor Whitlock announced the transition to modern warfare studies. The risk assessment AI had started displaying warning messages in interpretive dance, having given up on conventional communication methods. Professor Whitlock began the new module with a comprehensive overview of human military technology. The presentation started normally enough until he revealed that humans had achieved nuclear fission just to make bigger explosions. The energy being students, who had evolved through peaceful fusion, needed collective therapy after learning humans had weaponized atomic physics before developing reliable space travel. The class on human military vehicles caused particular distress. The mechanoid delegation short-circuited, trying to understand why humans still use treaded vehicles when anti-gravity technology existed. Professor Whitlock's explanation that humans enjoyed the aesthetic of tanks led to a philosophical debate about whether humans fought wars for tactical advantage or entertainment value. The simulation room became ground zero for practical lessons in modern combat techniques. Students were introduced to human virtual training systems. Starting with something called Call of Duty, the Hive Mind Collective became so engrossed in team deathmatch that they forgot to maintain their Hive Mind connection. Individual drones were caught practicing quickscoping during quantum physics lectures. When Professor Whitlock introduced the concept of cyber warfare, the silicon-based students initially felt confident. Their superiority lasted exactly 3 minutes, until he explained how humans had once crashed a nuclear facility's computers using something called Stuxnet and a USB stick. The entire computer science department had to be rebooted after trying to comprehend human hacking techniques. The lesson on psychological operations in the digital age proved especially disruptive. The concept of meme warfare sent the Academy's Cultural Studies department into chaos. The ethereal beings, who communicated through pure thought, couldn't process how humans weaponized jokes. Several students were caught attempting to recreate something called rickrolling in the quantum communication network. During the section on space combat, Professor Whitlock showed historical footage from human entertainment called science fiction. The engineering faculty demanded an immediate curriculum review when students began questioning why their advanced ships didn't have something called photon torpedoes. The quantum probability students started a petition to add pew-pew sound effects to the Academy's defense systems. The practical exercise in modern squad tactics had to be suspended when the crystalline species representatives began forming geometric battle formations based on human first-person shooter games. The gaseous collective students were banned from attempting camping strategies in the ventilation systems. Professor Whitlock had to explain that teabagging was not, in fact, a legitimate military maneuver. The homework assignment on analyzing human combat logistics caused another wave of existential crises. The bureaucratic collective discovered humans had won wars through something called improvised logistics, essentially making supply chains up as they went along. Their entire species had to take a mental health day to recover from this revelation. As the module progressed, concerning behavior spread through the student body. The arachnid students were caught attempting to modify their exoskeletons with what they called tactical accessories. The botanical species representatives began experimenting with camouflage patterns in their photosynthesis. Even the energy beings started practicing formation, flying in what they claimed was Top Gun style. Professor Whitlock's casual mention of human sports being basically warfare with rules sent the athletic department into turmoil. The Academy's zero-gravity basketball team insisted on implementing human tactics like full-court press and trash talking. The dean had to ban something called Defense Win Championships after it caused 3 diplomatic incidents during intergalactic tournaments. The final straw came during the Advanced Weapons Systems lecture. Professor Whitlock explained how humans had developed autonomous drone warfare, then chose to keep human pilots because it was more exciting. The concept of choosing less efficient methods for entertainment value caused the mechanoid students to start a philosophy club dedicated to understanding human logic. As the module concluded, the Academy's combat doctrine underwent an unprecedented transformation. Students began approaching problems with what they called human creativity, a development that terrified their instructors. The phrase, "What would humans do?" became both a rallying cry and a warning signal throughout the campus. The dean's office received reports of students starting a Human Warfare Appreciation Society, complete with weekly paintball tournaments and something ominously called Nerf Wars. Professor Whitlock was specifically instructed not to explain the concept of modding after several students were caught attempting to overclock their standard-issue training weapons. The Galactic Military Academy faced its greatest crisis during final examinations week. A rogue quantum anomaly, drawn by the concentrated academic stress of thousands of students, materialized in the quantum gardens. Standard containment protocols failed as the anomaly began consuming the Academy's defensive systems. The Academy's conventional military instructors deployed traditional tactics, energy barriers, probability fields, and quantum disruption arrays. Nothing worked. The anomaly adapted to each approach, growing stronger with every failed attempt at containment. Professor Whitlock calmly walked out of his classroom, still tossing his signature apple grenade. His students followed, carrying an assortment of improvised equipment that made the engineering faculty cringe. The Hive Mind Collective had reprogrammed cleaning drones using human gaming strategies. The crystalline students had modified their structural matrices based on human shield wall tactics. Even the gaseous collective had pressurized themselves into what they called tactical formation. Without warning, Professor Whitlock initiated what he'd taught them to call Plan Delta, or as humans knew it, winging it completely. The arachnid students deployed modified silk, nets containing quantum-charged cafeteria food. The silicon-based students launched a cyber attack using principles learned from human online gaming. The energy beings performed what they dubbed Space Force Recon, scouting the anomaly's weaknesses while humming the Mission Impossible theme. The combined assault of completely illogical tactics overwhelmed the anomaly's adaptive capabilities. It couldn't predict or counter strategies that defied conventional military logic. The final blow came when Professor Whitlock turned the Academy's PA system into an improvised sonic weapon, blasting something called "Never Gonna Give You Up" at the anomaly until it collapsed in on itself. As the quantum garden settled back to normal, the dean found Professor Whitlock grading papers amid the chaos, still eating his apple. The risk assessment AI had given up on probability calculations and was playing Fortunate Son on loop. Students from 17 different species celebrated their victory with human-style high fives, some requiring anti-gravity assistance to reach each other's appendages. The Academy's board met immediately following the incident. Their conclusion was unanimous. While human military doctrine might be chaotic, unpredictable, and occasionally terrifying, it was undeniably effective. Professor Whitlock received tenure on the spot, though his request to teach something called Advanced Shenanigans was pending review. The Galactic Military Academy would never return to its former rigid approach to combat doctrine. Human warfare had changed everything, for better or worse. As Professor Whitlock liked to say, sometimes the best tactical doctrine was having no doctrine at all. The risk assessment AI just played Another One Bites the Dust in response. The Galactic Military Academy underwent dramatic changes following the quantum anomaly incident. The curriculum now officially included human tactical innovation as a required course for all species. Professor Whitlock's classroom had to be expanded after becoming the most popular elective in Academy history. New warning signs appeared around campus, featuring phrases like "caution," "human-trained students at practice," and "warning," "creative problem-solving in progress." The maintenance department developed a special task force just to handle the aftermath of what they called human-inspired training exercises. The Academy's combat simulator needed constant upgrades to handle increasingly unpredictable student strategies. The AI running it eventually gave up trying to calculate success probabilities, and instead just played Earth battle music during training sessions. The sound of Eye of the Tiger became a normal part of daily campus life. Professor Whitlock's teaching method spread beyond military education. The science department reported students applying human creativity to quantum physics, resulting in several accidental breakthroughs and one minor dimensional breach. The engineering faculty had to establish new guidelines after students started describing their projects as basically space hot rods. The final validation came when the Galactic Defense Force started specifically requesting Academy graduates trained in human warfare tactics. Their reasoning: any species that can turn office supplies into weapons and win battles through sheer stubbornness is worth learning from. As another academic year began, new students arrived to find Professor Whitlock at the entrance, still tossing his apple grenade, still wearing his cargo shorts and Hawaiian shirt. Above the Academy's main gate, a new motto gleamed in quantum-enhanced letters: victory through creativity, innovation through chaos, and always keep your opponent guessing. The risk assessment AI had the final word, displaying its new standard message: probability of normal academic operations, 0%. Probability of learning legendary human combat techniques, absolutely certain. Good luck, everyone.